Today, we are going to unpack a really powerful idea that might just flip the way you see the world around you. We're talking about anti-fragility.
Think about it. Pretty much our whole lives, we're taught that stress is bad, that chaos is something to be controlled, and volatility is the enemy. But what if what if it's just wrong, or at least only half the story? What if some things out there don't just survive the messiness of life, but actually get better because of it?
All right, let's get right into it. To really get a handle on anti-fragility, we first need to look past our usual ideas of what it means to be strong or resilient.
We've all heard this one, right? Nietzsche's famous line. It's basically the poster child for resilience. You go through something tough, you make it out the other side, and you're stronger for it. It sounds about right, doesn't it? But here is where Nassim Taleb, the mind behind this whole concept, throws in a really important twist. He asks, does that quote really mean that an individual thing got stronger? Or could it just mean that a stressor came along, knocked out all the weak ones, and so the average of who's left is now stronger? See the difference? That's not the same thing at all. It hints that there's a whole other category we've been missing.
So, to make this crystal clear, Taleb lays out what he calls the triad. It's a simple but brilliant framework for understanding how everything, and I mean everything, from a coffee cup to an economy to you, reacts to randomness and shock.
First up, you've got the fragile. Just think of a delicate glass vase, or that old story of the sword of Damocles hanging by a single thread. It craves peace and quiet. It wants everything to be predictable. The slightest shock, any unexpected stress, and bam, it shatters. The fragile absolutely hates randomness.
Okay, so in the middle, we find the robust. The perfect image here is the phoenix. It can go through fire, it can handle chaos, but it just comes back exactly as it was before. It's tough, for sure. It resists damage, but it doesn't get better. It's basically indifferent to randomness. It just wants to be left alone.
And this is the main event, the anti-fragile. And the metaphor for this is just perfect, the Hydra from Greek mythology. Every time a hero cuts off one of its heads, two more grow back in its place. It gets stronger from being attacked. The anti-fragile doesn't just put up with shocks, it feeds on them. It loves randomness, because volatility is its fuel for growth.
And looking at it this way really makes it click. The fragile breaks under pressure. The robust just stands there and takes it. But the anti-fragile, it actually improves. Think about it. A porcelain cup shatters. A big stone block just sits there. But your body, when you expose it to the right kind of stress, like exercise, it gets stronger.
Now, this isn't just some cool thought experiment. The triad is like a new pair of glasses. Once you put them on, you start to see this hidden property of the world everywhere, often in places you'd least expect. Seriously, this principle is at play all over the place. From our own bodies and how we evolve, to how information spreads, to professional reputations, and even massive complex systems. Anti-fragility is hiding in plain sight. You just have to know what to look for. The easiest and most personal example is your own body. When you go to the gym and stress your muscles, they don't just repair themselves back to how they were. No, they overcompensate. They build back a little bit stronger, almost like they're getting ready for an even bigger challenge next time. Taleb talks about his own experience with weightlifting to explain this. Your body doesn't just heal, it makes a prediction. It says, okay, that was hard. The next stressor might be even harder, so I'm going to over-prepare. It's a perfect, real-world, anti-fragile response. Now let's jump to the world of ideas and information. What happens when someone tries to censor a book or shut down an idea? You know what happens? The very attempt to suppress it acts like a giant flashing billboard. It tells everyone that this information must be important or dangerous, and that just makes people want it even more. This shows how, for certain ideas or authors, there's no such thing as bad press. In fact, the nastier the reviews, the better. The attacks just signal that this is something worth paying attention to. As Taleb points out, the decades of brutal criticism aimed at Ayn Rand's books probably did more to fuel their massive success than any positive review ever could. The attacks made the ideas anti-fragile.
This same logic applies to something like reputation, but it gets a little tricky depending on who you are. For a corporate employee, say a banker, one scandal can be a career ender. It's totally devastating. Their reputation is fragile. But for an artist, a writer, a scandal can actually make them more famous, more talked about, more interesting. In that sense, their reputation can actually benefit from the hit. It's anti-fragile.
So this is all fascinating, but what can we actually do with this knowledge?
How do we set up our own lives to gain from all this uncertainty instead of being broken by it? Well, this leads us to a really practical strategy Taleb calls the barbell.
And the idea is just beautifully simple. Instead of putting all your eggs in one medium-risk basket, you split them between two complete extremes. You put most of your resources into something incredibly safe and protected, and then you take a small chunk and put it into something super speculative, with a potentially massive upside.
So, for example, maybe you keep 90% of your money in cash or a really stable job. That protects you from ruin. But then you take that other 10% and you expose it to what Taleb calls positive black swans. You invest in startups, you work on a wild creative project. This combination makes you really tough against negative surprises, but gives you huge exposure to positive ones. The key is avoiding that fragile middle.
You know, once you really start thinking in terms of this triad, fragile, robust, anti-fragile, and the barbell strategy, you start to see the world in a completely new light. It's not something to be predicted and controlled, but a place full of opportunity.
And that is really the ultimate takeaway here. We are obsessed with predicting the future, right? Economic forecasts, election results, but it's mostly a fool's game. The real goal should be to stop trying to guess what's coming and instead build things, our careers, our companies, our systems that won't fall apart when the future inevitably surprises us.
And if you want an amazing large-scale example, just look at the airline industry. Now, it's a tragedy every time a plane crashes, but the system as a whole is brilliantly anti-fragile. Every single failure is analyzed down to the tiniest detail, and the knowledge from that one error is then shared globally to make the entire system safer for everyone. The system literally learns and improves from its mistakes.
So, I'll leave you with a question to chew on. Take a look at your own life, your job, your health, your finances, your beliefs. Where are you fragile? Where are you like that porcelain cup, just one shock away from shattering? And then ask yourself the exciting question. Where could you be more like the Hydra? Where could you rearrange things so that the shocks and stresses of this crazy, uncertain world don't just fail to break you, but actually make you better?